Hi everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at planer setup and planer safety. We are going to be dealing with a Powermatic 20-inch planer. However, the safety as well as setup will probably apply to many of the larger industrial planers, as well as some of the smaller compact portable planers. So first thing we're going to talk about is why we have a planer, what the use of the planer is for. So we order all our lumber in the rough, meaning that when we look at it, it's coming directly from the sawmill, has a very rough finish to it. It is also 4/4 or 1 inch thick. All right, so this is a surface planer, a thickness planer. We will use this to not only smooth the roughness of this material, but also to reduce the thickness down to our final dimension of 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so when we look at how this tool functions, what it does, it has a series of rollers. So we have a in-feed roller, which is directly under here. We have an out-feed roller. We have these beds or platens that the board rides on. And in the center of those two rollers, we actually have a cutter head. Okay, now what the cutter head is, you can think about another third roller, which is basically rolling over top of this board with a series of knives. Those knives are designed to remove and shave material from this board. Okay, most planers have 3 carbide knives or 3 knives. Our planer has a quiet head in it, which is a helical. It's a helical cutter head, which has a multitude of small little knives, which make this a quieter planer than its predecessor. So anyway, what happens is you have this in-feed roller, which grabs the board, pushes it tight to the bottom of this table, and will actually feed the board through the planer, through the cutter head, and to the out-feed roller, where it will exit the planer. Okay. This tool is, fairly automated in the sense that you enter the board in, it basically does its work and pushes the board back out. However, there are still safety protocols and procedures that we need to remember and use while working with this tool. First one is following all other safety rules that we've already spoken about: safety glasses, shirts, danglies, etc. Follow the full list of safety rules that we use across the lab. Okay. Once those are in place, we are going to be looking at the specific danger zones or danger area of this specific tool. This has 2 real primary areas that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at, danger areas. So the first danger area being directly behind the board, okay? So because this has a cutter head that is going in this direction or actually cutting against the board as it's being fed in, if a kickback board would want to be thrown out in this direction, okay? So with that said, if you are standing directly behind the board and pushing in like this, okay, or even if your hand is at the butt of the board and you're forcing it in like this, if a kickback were to occur, that kickback is going to directly hit you, which is not a good thing, okay? A safer way to handle this board or feed this board is with both hands on either side of the board and pushing like this. If a kickback were to occur, the only thing that you would happen to get on your hand would be some splinters versus a broken wrist from having your hand at the butt of the board. Okay. Also, as the board exits the machine, we do have open rollers back here. Okay. You do not want your hands entering basically anywhere in the vicinity back here. What I like to tell people is, as the board exits the outfeed table, you do not want your hands anywhere near this outfeed table. So as the board exits this outfeed table, you do not want your hands anywhere on this outfeed table. You must pay attention to not coming anywhere close to these rollers. Beyond those rollers is the cutter head. Do not touch the board until it completely exits this table, which is right here. Okay, that gives you a good 14 to 16 inches away from issues. Okay. Also mind, as the board is coming off, that you do not get your fingers under the board, in between the board and the actual table. That is a squishing hazard. When we're ready to begin feeding this board, we have to look at the crown that is occurring in the board. Okay, so if I look at this board is crowning up with a high spot in the center here. Okay, that is the direction in which I want to feed this board into the planer. These 2 spots will actually run first on this. I will take out the high spot, and then I will flip it and take off the 2 high spots here, okay? If I were to run it the other way, this board is susceptible to rocking, as opposed to if I run it this direction, it's held flat on those 2 high spots, okay? So, looking at planer thickness setup, as with any other tool, I do not recommend relying on the thickness gauges on your planer. Okay, what I like to do is set this machine up manually and measure the board as it goes, because these little needles can be bumped, shifted, adjusted, so on and so forth. Okay? This is our thickness gauge. This adjusts the actual height of the table. So I can slide this and adjust this to adjust the thickness of my board. Setting this up, I like to take my board, slide it in and out, or lower the table until it does slide in and out, until I'm sliding through on my first in-feed roller, okay? At that point, I know that I'm not set too aggressively or too high, and I'll actually bring this up a full turn. So the in-feed roller is actually grabbing the board. When we look at how much material can be removed, one of the big questions I always get is, how much material can I remove per pass? When we look at this planer is designed for every turn or revolution of this dial is equal to a 1/16 of an inch, okay? So we don't like to take any more than 2 full turns, but it's completely dependent upon the material that you are feeding, all right? So this board is a piece of pine. It's only around 9 inches wide, which means this isn't much for this planer to handle, okay? If I had a solid maple glue up, which was 20 inches wide, you wouldn't want to take a full revolution on that because it's a very hard material and you're using up the full width of the cutter head. So now that I'm ready to run this board, I have my table height adjustment set. I am going to turn the planer on with this green button, or turn the power on your machine. I'm going to feed the board, and I'm going to walk around and exit the board. Notice my hand position, making sure that I don't get my fingers placed underneath the board and the actual in-feed roller. Notice how I wait for the board to come through before walking around, and notice how my hands are to the side of the board. I'm going to take a full revolution. Same direction, as that last cutter didn't really do much. Full revolution again. Full revolution again. And at this point, what you can see is that the board is actually getting completely smooth on one side, all right? So in 2 passes, I was able to smooth this whole side. At this point, I'm going to flip the board and get this side smooth while minding my width. You cannot take this board too thin, all right? So I said that I do not rely upon this side gauge. What I do rely upon is a steel rule to actually come on the side of the board and measure the thickness. Right now, we are still above 15/16 of an inch, so I still have plenty of room to work with. All right, so I'm gonna run this on, take my adjustment. And you would continue that process until the board thickness got down to your desired width. Now, a couple notes to make. Number one, If you plan on surface sanding this or doing a secondary sanding process after the planer, I would not take it to 3/4 of an inch, because if you take it to 3/4 of an inch and then sand it, you will actually be under that 3/4 of an inch final dimension, okay? Second thing to note is when we look at the length desired, okay? Every planer is going to snipe the board. So at the end, as the board exits the outfeed roller, and you may have heard the planer actually wind up a little, it takes a deeper groove out of the board, which is called a snipe, okay? What this is as it's exiting that board, as the board is exiting that outfeed roller, it actually lifts a little bit and the cutter head digs a little deeper there, okay? That snipe really can't be avoided. So with that said, you need to account for that in the length of your board. That 5-6 inches is going to be lost possibly due to that snipe on both sides, okay? So in best practice is to plane as long as possible, or to allow an additional 6 inches or so on either side in your finished piece so that that snipe does not affect your piece, all right? The third and final thing is, due to these outfeed rollers, okay, you have to watch the length of board that you're placing through this. If you place a board that is too short, where this one's not too short, but if you had a board that was half this length, the possibility exists for that board to get stuck between the infeed roller and the outfeed roller, just touching the cutter head. If there's no roller feeding this board, that board can actually become stuck in the piece of equipment. Two ways around that. Make sure that you're running a board that is at least 14 to 16 inches in length, so that it's coming in contact with both the infeed roller and the outfeed roller at the same time, depending on your machine. If you have a smaller machine, that could be 10 inches, 8 inches, whatever it might be. The second way around that is, if you have a short board, as you feed it through the planer, you can back that up with a longer board so that this short board continues to be pushed by the infeed roller from this board, okay? So you just have to keep in mind length of the board, as well as you know, how much material you're taking off due to the type of material. So pine versus a maple makes a grave difference in how much material you're actually taking off, all right? So as a safety review, as we said, you have to watch your danger zones, which are directly behind the board as you're feeding in. Fingers should not get caught underneath here and here, keeping your hands off to the side. As the board exits on the other side, make sure we are not touching the board until it leaves the platform or the platen. Make sure hands are not entering the cutting head or rollers at all. Good luck with your planing, and I hope you enjoyed the video.